Well, good morning. Thanks for coming. We want to give you a good update on the status of the preparation that we're taking for the forecasted high flows that are expected to come down the Big Sur River and Skunk Creek. Thought we'd take a minute this morning to just give you a tour around the city as in some of those key flows that we were informed of yesterday to kind of help you frame up why we're here. So to start with, on the Big Sur River, and the Big Sur River watershed starts in Watertown and ultimately has several thousand acres of land that will ultimately melt and flow into the Big Sur River and reach Sioux Falls. We're forecasted that there's a 50% chance that we're going to see about 28,000 CFS. What that means is that's high flow, but to put it into perspective for you is that really since 1969, the majority of those high flows down in the Big Sur River have been in that 16,000 to 20 range. So this is going to this has the potential to reach some of those high flows that we've seen in 1969 that actually hit 41,000 CFS. So we have a couple ways to handle that water as it comes in. So we have a diversion dam. That was our forefathers back in the late 50s made a great decision to actually put this diversion channel in so we could essentially shortcut most of those high flows around the city. The way the old river channel works is that the Big Sur River flows down here, down by Yankton Trail Park, up through the falls, and out of the city. Okay? And so when these high flows start to come through, we'll begin to send the majority of the water down the diversion channel, but we'll have to send water down the original channel for some technical and engineering reasons on the condition of that dam and backwater north of this area. We got the second contributing factor here, and it's not normal to have two rivers peak at the same time or within a day. So we've got Skunk Creek, and Skunk Creek's watershed's much shorter. So Skunk Creek actually starts in Brant Lake just north of Chester, and we're expecting those flows on Skunk Creek to pass through here and bring us about 10,000 CFS. Yesterday, we're fortunate to have the Civil Air Patrol fly between this confluence dam and Brant Lake, and there's a lot of water that's already out of the banks, and there's a lot of snow to melt yet too. So from what it's looking like, the forecasters are getting us ready for a significant amount of water coming down the Skunk Creek watershed and the Big Sur River, and ultimately that's why we're here to start to prepare. If we start to blend these flows of 10,000 CFS, and we could see as high as 8,500 CFS, that would put us down here in about 18.5, or very close to the level of flow that we just had this last weekend. That would go around the south end of the city and out. So hopefully, and then as they marry up, we could see cumulative flows of about 38,000 CFS going under the Cliff Avenue Bridge and then out of town, and eventually will work its way down to the Missouri River. So hopefully that gives you some perspective of the size of the two different watersheds, how we'll manage the water as it starts to come through. One of the key factors is the levee experts, the Army Corps of Engineers. They're sending two people that really provide technical assistance, but they'll also help train up a team of about 6. So when we start to see these high flows come through, we'll have different people 24/7 driving the tops of those levees to make sure that the integrity of those levees are rock solid as we work to pass these flows through. To give you a little sense of the structure, and so the city of Sioux Falls invested into an emergency operations center and has used this process for a number of situations over the years. It has a planning section, so they start to really plan and forecast what are some of the issues. There's an engineering section that starts to develop solutions. Then there's a logistics piece that they procure supplies, materials, and then there's an operations. They actually carry out the work. And then what you're doing today is Sandy Frenson leads this operation. It's the PIO, it's the public information. So really those 5 components you'll see a lot of work happen over the course of the next really 7 to 12 days to make sure that the city of Sioux Falls is taking every precaution necessary to protect the city and its property. We did talk a little bit about the Army Corps of Engineers. Some of the things outside of trying to keep the levee integrity system in check, they'll also provide us technical assistance for in certain areas where we can provide protection to some low-lying neighborhoods that are in the floodplain. We'll share with them the elevation of protection that we need, and then they can help advise us: do we use sandbags, do we use concrete jersey barriers, do we use HESCO bags, etc. So we're looking forward to having them in town, because they do this all the time, so they can provide us a great amount of insight. We also have a team right now that's has just finished identifying the level of protection we need for the public utilities. And so for those key wastewater lift stations, we're updating that. We're going to fortify a number of those lift stations, and then we'll transition into kind of finalizing those low-lying neighborhoods and some of the steps that we can take to provide protection. And then last, and I'll turn this over to Don Kearney, we are identifying the steps that we'll take for sandbagging, not only to sandbag the public utility infrastructure, but also to provide guidance and support for the public that actually wants to do some of their own sandbagging. And our goal is to actually have that plan identified and communicate that later today. And so we're still finalizing some of those points, but once it's ready, we'll certainly get it to you. And then last, we remain operationally ready. We still have all our pumps in place that we had this last weekend. So if we do have backwater issues that impact roads that make them impassable, we'll begin those pumping operations so we can minimize that downtime for some of those critical roads. So next up is Don Kearney, the Director of Parks, and he'll share with you what their team is working on. Thanks.
Well, good morning. Thanks, Mark. Don Kearney with Parks and Rec. I did want to share with the media today that we have officially closed Falls Park to any and all traffic in and out of there, whether it be foot traffic or vehicle traffic, and really obviously because of the historic flows that Mark had just talked about. So we have barricades at all the major walkways and roadways that lead in and out of Falls Park, and just ask for your compliance as a community about staying out of Falls Park, knowing that these historic flows are coming through. Do want to give fair warning to everybody in the community that the police department will be monitoring these closures, not only in Falls Park, but in other parks along the Big Sioux River and Skunk Creek, and we'll be enforcing those closures. Just a reminder, in addition to Falls Park, we currently have and still have a list of other parks that are along the Big Sioux River and Skunk Creek that remain closed from this past weekend. So those are still in effect. Also remind you that we do have 80 parks in Sioux Falls, so there are other parks than those that are along the waterways that we have for you to be able to enjoy. I know it's going to be nice, but I can't emphasize enough how we need your cooperation to stay out of those areas so that the city teams can really focus on the flood fight that's ahead of us. And so, again, just can't emphasize that enough. The mayor mentioned it as well yesterday, but you know, we really just need your cooperation, and anything the media can do to help us get that word out, we'd really appreciate it. Now I'll turn it over to Regan Smith, the emergency manager.
Regan Smith, emergency manager, City of Sioux Falls. Mark talked about the forecast. We're continuing to partner with the National Weather Service to receive the latest information there. The forecast remains the same as yesterday, so we're continuing our preparedness efforts based on that forecast. As far as the city, we continue to prepare. We talked yesterday about the mayor's emergency declaration. That allows us to mobilize additional resources, and it streamlines our procurement process so we can get that swift response here as soon as possible. We're continuing to coordinate with the governor's office on our response. We've got representatives from South Dakota Emergency Management and the governor's office here at Emergency Operations Center, so that communication is seamless. The governor has closed the Big Sioux River to navigation. I think that information is out or will be coming out soon. The general public, if you want to know if your property's in the floodplain, please check out the city's website, www.siouxfalls.org/flood. There's a link on there to the FEMA's website. You can go in there, plug in your address, and it will tell you if you are in that floodplain. There are about a little over 500 structures in the floodplain in Sioux Falls. If you are in one of those structures or residents, you do have time to prepare. Again, know your risk, know how to stay informed, whether it's local media, weather reports, your weather radio. Consider moving your personal property to higher ground if possible, and store supply those valuable items that you can grab quickly if you need to evacuate, things like prescriptions, important paperwork, and those family heirlooms. Again, this organization is expanding in addition to the agencies I've described over the last few days. We're working closely with the Governor's Office, South Dakota Emergency Management, Department of Corrections, State Department of Transportation, the National Weather Service, the Corps of Engineers, and Civil Air Patrol. Volunteers, we still need volunteers, so please reach out to 211 if you can help. We've had 304 calls since last Wednesday. Of those, 62 people have volunteered to help, and we've got 66 homeowners that have requested help. We're also requesting groups. If you've got church groups, civic groups, those type of things, this would be a great project for you. So again, with that sandbagging coming, there's going to be a real need out there to help not only the city but your neighbors. So it is hard work, and we're going to need a lot of people. With that, I'll turn it over to Sandy.
Good morning, Sandy Frentz, Public Information Officer. So I just wanted to follow up really briefly on Director Carney's information regarding the park closures and law enforcement. I just wanted to reemphasize that going around a barricade in a park is a Class 2 misdemeanor that comes with an affiliated fine of $122.50. You can also be cited for a Class 2 misdemeanor of $97.50 for being in a closed park. So if you're caught going around barricades, for example, and being in Falls Park, you can be cited for both of those Class 2 misdemeanors. Law enforcement is issuing citations. They issued a handful of them last weekend with last weekend's flooding events, and 2 of those did end up leading to additional arrests because of additional infractions. So as Director Carney said, you know, the law enforcement is partnering with us on this, and they are going to be enforcing the park's closures. So with that, I'd like to bring Jason Gierman, Minnehaha County Emergency Manager, up to give you an update on the county, and then we can entertain questions.
Hi, Jason Gierman, Minnehaha County Emergency Management. Some of the things I want to touch on today are the people that are living out in the county in floodplains, whether it be housing, livestock, etc. You might want to think about moving these items or getting your equipment out of that area. Again, the FEMA website that Reagan Smith mentioned is a good way to look and see what areas are going to be affected. These will also be on the county website in the future. Some of the questions that I'm getting asked is about sandbags. What we're in the process of doing is bringing sandbags to the cities within Minnehaha County, Baltic, Del Rapids, whoever requests them. We're hoping to work with the cities, and we're working with Del Rapids right now on setting up a site where people can come to get these sandbags if needed. I'm not recommending people come to emergency management to get sandbags because we're going to try and get them out to the community. 211, that number keeps coming up over and over again. Just because you're in the county doesn't mean you can't utilize or volunteer to use the 211 system. This is a work in progress for us, so things may change rapidly, especially with our sandbagging operations. We are working very closely with the state and getting these assets that we need and resources. And as Reagan said, there's people with the state in our office side by side, and we really appreciate that. think I've touched on everything as far as the county. Again, we'll reiterate just what the city said. Stay off the county roads. The county roads are in horrible shape right now with the thaw and the water, and the townships do not want you on their roads and wrecking them. Please stay, don't go past the barricades. Deputy sheriffs and highway patrol will be out checking these areas too. Thanks.
So are there any questions that you would like to direct to any of us here yet today?
When was the last time Falls Park was closed in this manner?
We're not aware of Falls Park being closed in its entirety like we've just done. There have been some partial closures over the years for a variety of different reasons, but this is the first one that we're aware of where it's been a complete closure.
Mark, did you talk about when the Army Corps of Engineers are going to be in the city?
Sure. The question is, when is the Army Corps of Engineers going to be in the city? We're expecting them at noon, and then we'll first stand up the training of the levee inspection, concurrently looking at some of those situations where we want their feedback on if, again, what strategy do we use based on the elevation of protection that we need to deploy, and then that will, once we can get that technical assistance, that will spin up a number of other operations that we expect to start later today. Other thoughts, questions?
We've seen it happen in Nebraska. What's the concern of the levee breaking here, or if it does happen, what's the outlook on that?
So the question is, what's the outlook if the levee breaks? That's the key reason to actually have the Corps of Engineers here. And we're fortunate that we just went through about a 12-year levee raising project, and so between the state of South Dakota, the city of Sioux Falls, and the federal government collectively worked together, invested about $65 million to raise and fortify not only the levees but the spillways. And so we have a high degree of confidence in our levee system based on recent construction practices. We also, those levees are inspected every year, everything from trees to varmints to anything of that nature, and we check off those items accordingly so we can appropriately maintain them on an ongoing basis. But we're confident in our levee system. But if there becomes a breach, that's why the Army Corps of Engineers will train a team of people that you'll see driving the tops of those levees, and we'll start to look for anything that might impact their integrity. Okay.
I also wanted to clarify about sandbags. You guys said that you are finalizing a plan today and should release something this afternoon. And does that include for homeowners?
It does. And so I would expect, in a matter of hours, we'll have a plan that we can communicate of location, quantity, so people can, if they need, and I would say if you're in the floodplain, start to take appropriate measures to protect your property. We'll have those details laid out for that at that time.
What's the latest information for, call it target date and time, 7 o'clock Sunday, or, I know it's hard to pinpoint, but when is it we're going to start seeing effect?
Yeah, let me, if I can just go back to my notes here quickly. All right, so the hydrologists and the forecasters this morning shared that we're still only expecting about a quarter to a half an inch of rain. That's a key variable. They're still forecasting that the heavy rains are going to be essentially south of Sioux City. If that band of rain moves north, that's going to be, in some cases, could be a game changer for us that will add on to what they today forecast can be in that 5 to 8 inches of water that's essentially in the watershed north of us. Right now, they're forecasting for the skunk to come through on Sunday, Monday time frame, and they're forecasting for the Big Sur River to come through starting on Tuesday. The one thing that we have to be aware of is these are not going to be short peaks. These are going to go on for the highest peak on the Big Sur River they expect will be probably at least 24 hours, but we're going to still run flows higher than what we've normally seen for probably a period of 5 to 7 days. And so when we've seen issues happen between Sioux Falls and Del Rapids, a lot of those flows have been in that 16,000 CFS range. The hydrologists are getting us prepared that even though the peak, if this is a 50 percentile peak that'll hit that, they're still preparing us that we could see 20,000 CFS for 4 or 5 days. And so you've got this won't be a short event once it comes here. And then Skunk Creek ultimately should be shorter because the nature of the watershed is only from here to Chester. But the nature of this watershed is from here to Watertown. So that's a lot of water that's got to melt, work its way to the Big Sur River and down. So that's what we're planning for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then we're going to be seeing these flows commingled for probably the better part of a week.
What we had last Wednesday and Thursday, would you typify that as a short event?
I would. I'd typify that as a short event, and it also recovered quickly. And a lot of that was just what was really close and on top of that rain. So you can see the impact of having that rain on top. Now we were fortunate to have the Civil Air Patrol fly between Sioux Falls and Chester yesterday, and there's still a lot of snow. There's a lot of water that's out of its banks already on the Skunk Creek. And so that's just one picture. We're sending teams today to go between Sioux Falls and Brookings, and we're taking samples of that snow, weighing it, and getting a sense of the water content so we can try to establish, do we have 4 to 8 inches of water content? Is it more? Is it less? Things of that nature. Any of that data, at least, I think, can help the hydrologists understand and help us forecast for what's to come. Well, thank you for coming today. Again, we do expect to have information later today on sandbags for the public, and we'll get that information out as quickly as we can. Thank you.